podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Live podcast. I'm Mary Crean, and today I'm here with my co-host, Joseph.
Hey, Mary.
Hey, what's going on?
All things are good.
Great. It's always nice to see you and spend some time with you, of course. And we have a very interesting guest.
I am personally excited for today's guest because I think he and I share a bunch of similar background and interests, so it should be fun.
I want to hear a little bit more about that. I know I came to the party a little late today, so we'll have to dive into that a little bit. But without further ado, Joseph, please introduce our guest.
It'd be my honor. So today we have Daniel Shaw on the show. He is the founder and CEO of Autumn, an end-of-life marketplace that connects bereaved communities with local providers to help manage life after loss. Autumn offers surviving families free guides and tools and connects them to local experts to navigate the legal, financial, logistical, and emotional challenges that follow the death of a loved one. In short, Autumn makes loss more livable. Welcome, Daniel. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your business.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Long-time listener, first-time podcaster, I guess. I have a strange meandering background. I was going to medical school back in the day. I studied nutritional sciences and broke my Jewish mother's heart by not becoming the surgeon that I thought I would be. And then I worked in the creative advertising industry for 20 years. So I sort of in the early aughts was making MySpace pages for movies, the golden age of digital advertising. I went to the premieres. It was so much fun. And I got a crash course in digital production for products and experiences for Fortune 500 companies, executive management, digital strategy. And then I went to like a big brand agency, big creative agency called Wieden & Kennedy, very famous for every Nike commercial you've ever seen. Dan Wieden actually wrote Just Do It. It comes from him specifically. So I got this huge sort of brand strategy background as well. And it was a wonderful career. And over the course of those 20 years, I had a lot of death in my family. And it was very strange to me as a tech person when I was sort of asked to help out. I went to the web and I didn't really find much. What I found was even worse. It was hard to follow. It was ugly. It was verbose editorial blog posts, obviously geared for SEO. It was impossible to parse, not actionable. Nothing was localizable to my personal circumstance. And it really piqued my interest. It didn't make sense to me that death was almost the last white space of the internet. Every other capital market has been completely upended by the web. And yet death was still this analog, fragmented, awful process. And it really stayed with me. And over the subsequent years, with more family death, and friends dealing with this, it just kept sort of reemerging. And over that time, startups began to emerge. And I felt like they were adopting the predatory nature of the death care industry, sort of big funeral. And that only, I thought, was mean. It didn't make sense to me as from a business model, from a scalability tech solution platform. They were charging people for things that not only thought should be free, but it wouldn't scale because it's really expensive. Death is incredibly expensive. And yet these sort of digital concierges were charging even more. And so in 2020, my business partner and I, he was the head of technology at Wieden. We left and started our own thing, building other people's products. In 2020, we decided to make sort of a go at our own thing. And I came back to this thesis that I had about this experience was that, excuse me, the biggest consumer problem after a death is not knowing what to do. And if you don't know what to do, you don't know who to hire or what to buy, because the end-of-life market lacks trust and transparency. And at the end of the day, no internet company can actually tell you what to do, because death is so circumstantial to who you are and where you are, that at the end of the day, this is a local business problem. You need people on the ground in your community who can help out legally, financially, logistically, and emotionally. And so my thought was that the best way to provide a service was to create a marketplace, because that allows us to create this sort of free tool, a TurboTax-like product that guides you through step-by-step everything you need to do at a local level and connects you to all those people on the ground. So in 2020, we built a prototype. It was called funeralchecklist.com. I bought the domain for $10. I wrote it myself. And for a couple $100 in Google AdWords, we got over 4,000 people to use it very quickly and some very compelling data. And that allowed me to raise capital in 21. And we launched Autumn in the summer of 22. We built half the product to de-risk the demand side of the market. We really focused on building that sort of guidance product. And we just scraped all of the providers from Google. So the profiles are real, but they don't look very trustworthy. And so our next step, the things we're working on now, is to just focus on New York City, build out that supply, and really show that we can prove the business model works. And then, of course, raise more capital next year.
Wow, that's quite a story. And I have so many questions, but I'm going to limit it to a few right now. Can you talk a little bit about what Autumn actually is, a little more concretely, of course, and then also share how you help people?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a misconception that death is just a couple of weeks and just a funeral home. The process of what to do after someone dies can take upwards of a year plus to complete. And actually, nearly half the money people spend on funerals on death happens outside of a funeral home. There are lots of hidden costs, legally and financially and logistically, that you need to handle. And typically, people don't know what to do. And that's not necessarily because this consumer, I pause often when I speak in the private sector about this really emotional experience, but it's easier to understand. This consumer is not ignorant. It's secondary ignorance. They don't even have the language to use to search. They don't know the questions to even ask. And so for the 200 plus things you need to do, you need an easy, well-designed solution to figure out step-by-step what to do. And right now, when you search the web, you're typically getting just articles. Just, again, SEO-driven things from an insurance company or other sort of death care providers that, to be honest, are conflicted. They're actually trying to sell you something. And so Autumn, at its core, is a really well-designed tool that really guides you through step-by-step, simply, of what you need to do. And it's localized to where you are and your personal circumstance. So as you go through, you can sort of answer questions, because if you have a will, you do this. And if you don't, you do that. If you had a trust, if you have money, if you don't, there are so many sort of logic tree exercises that go through. So by sort of offering this free guide out into the market, we think we can sort of aggregate the demand side of the market, because at the end of the day, that's the first problem, not knowing what to do. Because the moment you tell them what you have to do, you realize, oh, I might need an attorney. I might need an appraiser. I might need a move manager. I might need a direct cremation services. I might need a celebrant. I might need a doula. I could go on. There are dozens of local businesses that help people during this problem. And so Google searches are not enough. And at the end of the day, we've gotten on the web great marketplaces to find plumbers and electricians and roofers. But this incredibly difficult life experience does not yet have a service. So I just want to make empathetic, free software that helps people guide them through the whole thing.
So, like Mary, I have many thoughts, comments, questions. One thing many people don't know about me is many years ago, I think it was the second startup I worked for, was in the memorial space. Similar to what you described as this being this white space of the internet around death. I remember very vividly going to bed almost every day, every night after work, and all I could think about was death, right? It can wear on you. So, I mean, you used the phrase death tech, I think, at some point, maybe not on the air, but prior to the conversation. I'm a big fan of age tech. This podcast came out of some work that both Mary and I have done in the age tech space. First question is, how do you define those? What's the difference? Are they overlapping? I believe there's a huge opportunity, and I agree with you. There's a ton of white space in both of the, however you define it, right? The Venn diagram of death and age, right? There's definitely a lot of white space. You mentioned trust and transparency. I think that's huge, because I know we've had other people on the show talking about some of these issues. So maybe just tell us how you define those two areas and what your plan is to conquer it.
Yeah, it's a good question and a lot of nuance in there. I think the terms age tech or silver tech or death tech, these are all hashtags that VCs put together to get their own SEO, to get deal flow. But I think there's merit within some of them. So
you want to start a VC? Is that what you want?
No, with all respect to my cap table, no, I'm good. I think death tech is a bit too narrow for what we're doing. when I hear death tech, I actually think it's very specific to disposition. And there's a lot of really great work happening out there as a result of public policy changes across the United States, right? So like previously, direct to cremation was not really available because the internet didn't exist. Water cremation is really popular now because obviously normal cremation by fire is a huge carbon polluter. Natural organic reduction, so you can compost a body, is only available in 8 states. But I know it's cringe and no one maybe can't see your face, but it's actually a really beautiful thing, So the point of all of that is I think death tech is specific to that. And I do think age tech as a umbrella term encapsulates much more. In fact, I don't refer to Autumn as a death care marketplace because, like I said, death is much more than just disposition. I say an end of life because a lot of it is preparation for end of life, whether that's all the legal and financial work you need to do, or like I said, at the at-need side of the market, all the things you need to do after somebody dies.
I have to just touch on that composting piece for a quick second. There's such a thing as water cremation and composting of a body.
Income or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau Insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Coverite is the first digital concierge health insurance platform focused on Medicare. Their mission is to make Medicare more transparent and accessible for America's 60 million Medicare beneficiaries. By simplifying a traditionally confusing and complex decision, Coverite delivers a simple, seamless, and hassle-free plan selection and enrollment experience. Try the Coverite platform and see for yourself why they've been referred to as the TurboTax for Medicare. Visit coverite.com/podcast to learn more.
Yes. So there's a lot of backlash I'll rephrase positively. There's a lot of new green movement work in disposition because traditional burial with a casket that's full of metal and wood isn't helping the world. And so there's a movement in green burial. So rather than that box, there's one that would compost or break down more organically. Again, cremation is pretty heavy carbon polluter, and so there's now less of that. So water cremation is called alkaline hydrolysis, and it's the same process, it's just not using fire. And then, I personally think the natural organic reduction, colloquially human composting, is a really fascinating sort of approach. And there are facilities up in Seattle at the moment that are doing great work that you sort of just are in a box for a while and you go back to the earth and you can become a tree. I think that's wonderful.
Well, you're in a box for a while for most of these solutions, but that's a whole other conversation. I'll let Mary take the next question. Yeah.
No, I'm very intrigued by this whole conversation. And I really am, because I'm thinking, wow, now that I know this, my own plans may be changing. And again, I apologize, but I've never heard of water or composting with humans. I find it fascinating. And I think people should be able to do, within reason, what they want to do. And I know part of it is, we've had other guests on and say that, if you don't decide your, end of life, someone will decide it for you, and it may not be exactly what you anticipated. But my question really is, what are some of the challenges that you face with a startup of this nature? Because, the first thing that comes to mind is, we like to laugh on Prime Life podcasts, but I know this is, a serious conversation, and it could be a little bit. And then when you were talking about why the arena of death, there was so much white space still. I mean, it's always a tricky topic, and it's one that people like to avoid, except we're all eventually going to die. So I would just love to hear a little bit about, what are some of the challenges that you have faced with this startup and also being in this industry, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll punctuate our last conversation as a transition to answer that, which is that the fact that you haven't heard of these things, I think, validates my point, which is that big funeral, I use that in as a term, has really sort of convinced us there's only one way to die. And I'm not talking smack on the death care industry. They do fantastic work. They are incredibly hardworking people, want to do right by their consumers. But I really think that it's, to draw an analogy to my previous marketing life, like De Beers is the greatest marketing scheme of all time because it has convinced America there's only one way to love, and that's with a diamond. Well, the fact that you only think that you can bury somebody is a result of an industry and a lobbyist that has really convinced public policy makers that you have to do it one way. And for 100 years, it all comes after the Civil War, actually, and embalming bodies so that they can come back to their communities. A big industry popped up. So with the age of the internet and this sort of DIY sort of approach, people are questioning that. The funeral industry is being upended by a tidal wave of demographic change. More people are going to die in the next 30 years than ever before in American history because of the baby boomers. And it's the next generation that operates differently for once in the last 100 years. And so I guess that's my point, is that people are looking for, or thinking there should be something else and not really finding it. And the goal of a marketplace and a free guidance tool to educate is sort of a way to help you, Mary, realize maybe you don't want to just go on a cardboard box or something in the ground.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just going to chime in here for a minute. So we are going to have a guest. We haven't launched the episode, who is actually from this industry. It's been a generational family. They're making some changes. But while you were talking, Daniel, all I could think about was our guest that we will, be launching their episode, or her episode. And I know she was even sharing, as their business has expanded, that they've made adjustments along the way just because of that. Families are multicultural. Again, to your point, people want to do things differently. And I do agree. I think as time goes on, the younger generation, now I sound like I'm dating myself, which I am, but I love the different thought process. And I love that maybe the different ways of how do we really celebrate life. It's nice to have tradition, because I know some of those traditional ways that we celebrate life. But I think also some of the new ways that you spoke of. So Joseph, go ahead. I know you're anxious to ask the next question.
Well, no, I will ask a question, but I want to pick up on something Daniel said, building on what you said. So you were talking about how not making decisions, someone's going to make it for you. Daniel was talking about how the population is aging quickly. Current stat, 10,000 people turn 65 every day, and we're going to be above more people above 65 than under 18 in a few years, which is a bigger demographic issue. And those people will be making the decision, and they will be looking for these alternatives, right? This is a demographic that is looking at, new ways of doing things. So it is an interesting time to be in this business, Daniel. And so you have a little bit of a wave behind you, it sounds like. But I worked for a business recently that called itself the TurboTax of Medicare. You referenced TurboTax. TurboTax may start suing everyone who's using TurboTax, but that's a different story. Tell us, walk us through, as much as you can visually, describe what your process is. Just some basic idea. I think most people understand TurboTax, but maybe just give a couple of flavors to what that looks like for you.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, if I get a cease and desist from TurboTax, it means I'm doing a good job, so I welcome it. Yeah, and I didn't really even answer your question, Mary, about what's so hard. So I'll combine these. So any marketplace, the challenge is the demand side of the market. You incentivize suppliers; they're going to come on board. You get them new customers, you get them money. They don't care; they'll sign up. What's so challenging about this consumer is that they are approaching this in many different ways. So not to be really dry again, but death is actually just an incredibly complicated project management exercise. It is a distributed team project where everyone around you, in your family and not, are doing different things at different times, trying to help out. And yet it's chaos. And so my goal, not to really sound all tech dystopian, is there has to be software to solve that problem, to make it much easier for the bereaved and the surviving family to manage that process. And the analogy I always make is like, I know maybe this is a joke, but like online dating was weird until it wasn't. Doing many things online was weird until it wasn't. And it is inevitable that people are going to be managing this process from their phone in the future. And like you said, this new generation that's managing this, whether their parents or grandparents have left sort of requests for what to do, are still going to be looking to the web to do something different. And as a free tool and a product that allows you to sort of more easily manage that, we just need to be sort of out there in the places that people go. So, I offer very often to hospice. It's a free tool because often hospice doesn't really have much more than a pamphlet. And that's right after a death. But we find people come to Autumn like when they're a couple weeks later planning the funeral, or months later when they're handling probate or settling the estate and they need an attorney, or they are thinking about their future and want to write a will or a trust for their next of kin. So the goal of having a huge, wide sort of guidance product that actually supports the entire process, it really widens our top of funnel and gets people through the door. And so that gets to really the heart of your question, Mary, about what's so hard. Building death business is challenging for a number of reasons, but the top are, Joseph, like you said, there's enormous tailwind. There's a lot of change happening, but that's not as quickly as people adopt, an Uber or buying stocks. The frequency of this purchase is very slow, though the AOV is very high. And so low frequency marketplaces are its own challenges. And then the other thing is like building tech in this category, you have to transpose all of the great sort of best practices that you find. So user interviews are tricky because it's incredibly emotional. So the people I talk to can be really tricky. The design, deploy, iterate mantra to just see how people react and then iterate and change it moves more slowly. So all of the things that you sort of find out there that you would apply to any business you're doing tech-wise just has a bit more challenge here. And, I just constantly need to realize that though this is, a dry project management exercise, these are real people with an incredibly emotional challenge ahead of them.
I would think, though, Daniel, that this is maybe the type of person I am, but when I've had like something happen in my life that was really challenging, the way that I deal with it is I like to share what I've learned with other people to see if I can help them. I don't force my opinion on them, but I try to share so they perhaps won't go through some of the things that I've gone through. I'm saying that to say, I bet that there are individuals that will want to share with you. I know it's tricky. I know it's emotional, but it also could be very cathartic, I'm thinking, as well. So I have like high hopes for your testimonials and no, I really do, because like, I just do. And I was thinking also, you talked about all the different, and all the different, like the lawyers and whatnot. And I always go to lawyers for some reason. I think about trusts and all of that and wills. So do you envision that you'll be partnering in some way? Because I'm still trying to wrap my head around your business. And so like, of course, one of the questions I have is like, so how are you going to make money? So that, so
Fair question.
yeah. So could you talk a little bit about that and what maybe will some of your collaborations look like?
Now an ad from one of our sponsors. Remember when you could trust the news? Well, then check out Walter. Walter is the free, no-nonsense newsletter for grown-ups that comes to your inbox 3 times a week. From current trends, aging in place, travel, retirement, and everything in between, including a dash of pop culture trivia and throwbacks, Walter is a great way to start your mornings and to stay informed. Oh, and did we mention that it's free? Check us out at thisiswalter.com. Get smart. Get Walter.
Don't answer that unless she's giving you money. And by the way, don't forget my TurboTax example. I don't want our listeners to lose that.
I welcome any and all contributions. I take lunch or credit card. So yeah, no, it's a very fair question, and to be honest, we're pre-revenue, right? My goal at the beginning was to, like I said, de-risk the demand side of the market to show that there's a need for this information, without which we then can't have marketplace liquidity, which is of course having demand consumers finding suppliers. So it's at the beginning a very simple exercise. Suppliers will pay us to be listed on the platform. It's at the beginning a monthly subscription fee, but I have spoken to some provider types, like a lawyer, who may not want to just do a monthly sub. They would prefer to do a fee for each lead that they get, or even a percentage of sale. Real marketplaces that have incredible power, of course, and network effects are doing a take rate. They did percentage of each transaction that happens on the platform. So Airbnb and Uber are huge because they facilitate everything. It's a heavily managed marketplace. The trickiness in this business is that you transact offline. So I won't be able to convince a funeral home or an attorney to actually use Autumn to process their payments. And that's fine. That's not our goal at the beginning. But a death doula might, or an appraiser might. And so there are many different ways in to figure that out. And in all transparency, I am figuring that out now. I'm just making sure that we can figure out that the business works. There's need on both supply and demand side. Because at the end of the day, the real problem on the supply side is it is a word of mouth business. And often these suppliers reach a sort of a plateau. They don't know how to expand their word of mouth network. And worse, they don't really know how to present themselves well online. They don't have really great websites. They don't know how to produce that trust and transparency. And as a digital marketer, I can help them with that.
I'm just going to chime in and say, I love your answer for a lot of reasons. And I agree. And I think what you've done, and I marvel at this, you didn't just say, oh, we're going to build something and see if they come. You're doing you're taking all the right steps. And again, it's that need, filling emotional needs. And I can go on and on, but I commend you for that. And that was a great answer. I know, Joseph, you're next. I feel like we can talk all day about
Yeah, I was just going to say we're getting close to our time, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about the flow, because I think that question got lost in the mix. Because you want to make an investment, I knew it, but we're not taking investments on this show.
You could find me later on daniel@autumn.co and send me.
So now you answered our last question. Okay,
yeah,
good.
Exactly. Sorry, what you said? Flow? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about the TurboTax
yes.
experience, and just what are the types of questions people will answer. Maybe just walk through what that looks like at a high level.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I obviously only use that term colloquially because it's the most pithy way to describe what this is. And everybody in the Valley speaks in comp, in analog. There's no way to describe a new product at all. Though VCs hate when you're the Uber of X or Y, but TurboTax seems to be used a lot, clearly, Joseph.
No, it definitely is. I mean, it's an easy way to understand. If someone's used TurboTax, it's an easy way to, question, prompt, answer leads to.
Exactly. No, I think that the process by which people use Autumn typically is they are searching Google for something. And whether that's the broad term, like I have no idea what to do, or a funeral checklist, which is the reason I built the prototype with that title, because it was so on the nose. You get people in top of funnel sort of, I don't know what to do, help me. And then people are immediately at the beginning of that process and are sticky users and go through the entire thing for a year. Or people are searching for really long tail queries that are ultra specific. How do I submit an inventory form to New York City Surrogates Court, which is the court that's actually used for probate? It's not called probate court. It is in New York State, but not New York City. End of life laws in each state make this ultra complicated. The terms are different. It's esoteric. It's confusing. And at the end of the day, when you're dealing with death, it's almost a temporary disability. And I use that term clinically because you're confused, you can't think straight, you're disorganized, and at the end of the day, you actually just want someone to help. And often, to your point, Mary, you might have suggestions from someone in your community, but they have a life. They're not helping you through. And so the TurboTax analogy is to sort of just be the seamless helping hand. So at the beginning, Of course, we raise a little money, and when it was our MVP, it's just a well-designed step-by-step process with ways to easily localize to your circumstance. We ask questions, and then when you unfurl that, you'll see specifically what you do or what you shouldn't do, and guide you to the next step. But in the future, it'll be much more intelligent. The other thing I'll say is that there are lots of businesses built on withholding information. So sometimes when you have to get a death certificate from a local government, state government, county government, you are paying a private company to print a form. This is a physical piece of paper you have to pay $50 for. And to find that form, you have to pay random websites because the government isn't even doing it for you. That's ridiculous. And I think that there's a huge opportunity to just offer those things through this product to make it just easier to just get it done.
Go right to the question, get your answer.
That's exactly right. The websites of these companies and these local governments, as you can imagine, are horrific. They're not mobile optimized. They're impossible to find. I am a tech person, and I'll tell you, it is challenging.
Oh, don't get me started on governmental websites. Another show.
Yeah, it is. And I definitely agree with that. And I think that was a really great example that I hadn't thought of, but, it kind of worries me so much because that could be, people, as you said earlier, they're confused, they're tired. So many things are going on, and it's not a good time to have to deal with that. So we do have a final question, but before we get to that, what's next for Autumn?
Yeah. So like I said, we really focused on building half the product. We built that guidance product to see if people can use it and how they're going to use it. And the next step is to really make sure that we can show end-to-end conversions just in New York City. So we're going to relaunch the site in a couple months with about 20 providers, the team that you need after this process, and really show that people are searching for this or using the product and then contacting these people. And the moment we do that, I can then monetize. And the moment we get monthly recurring revenue, hopefully early next year, I can go back to the Valley and do the whole dog and pony show and raise the seed round.
Joseph, do you want to ask Daniel our closing question?
I will ask Daniel a few closing questions.
I'm ready for it.
Are you ready for it? Here we go. So Daniel, you obviously, you started down the path of medical school. You worked in big advertising businesses. You're a tech guy, product guy, could do, 100 different businesses probably popped through your head over the years. Why this and why now? What keeps you motivated?
That's a really fair question. You don't like going to sleep thinking about death all day, Joseph, when you were doing that? Then?
I've moved on.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a personal reason and then a professional reason. The personal is that this shit is hard. I don't know how else to say it more simply. And I was just so confused as to why it doesn't exist. And it made me angry, honestly. I don't know if the founder story of anger is the fuel that you should say publicly, but I was just so angry at the process that people need to go through to do this, and it doesn't make sense.
I think the word you were looking for is passion.
Oh, thank you, passion. But the other part of it is that, honestly, it just feels really good to use my powers for good. I can't begin to tell you how different it feels doing this than working for name, big brand, insert. And then the other thing is, to be honest, I think it's an enormous opportunity, and I don't think anyone is doing it correctly. I haven't given you the whole spiel about the future growth of this company, but I think we become the modern death care company, the modern end-of-life brand. And this is the wedge to do that. And I think a lot of people have tried to do this, and there's a lot of roadkill in the category because they just try to be a digital funeral director. That acquisition cost is way too high. You can't expand. Your focus is you're much too focused. I really studied the market to figure out strategically how to enter this world and grow. And I think that there's just an enormous opportunity in the future. And so that's what fuels my passion.
Yeah, I agree. I love what you said. And I think we could really have another conversation with you. And I think we should to, get an update on, how Autumn is doing. And, and I agree. I think, and it's going to be interesting down the road too, because it's like what you said earlier about, online dating wasn't weird and was weird until it wasn't weird. Like there's just so many things that we've seen that have been transformational in our lives. We could give a long list of that. And
Mary,
so
you obviously haven't watched the Jetsons then, because none of this is new. We know that.
well, so Joseph,
It's just reality now.
yes, you're right. And so Joseph, it's been a while since you've mentioned the Jetsons, which usually comes up here and there. And you're right. You got me. You're absolutely right. I forgot about that. It was one of my favorite shows growing up. Daniel, thank you for joining us today on Prime Life Podcast. It was great to have you. Again, I think we should have you back, and I'd love to learn more. Joseph, it's always really the highlight to spend time with you. And I think we've had some laughter, which is nice because again, when, knowing the topic, death is not always an easy topic to talk about, but I think that you've, Daniel, your company, you've really brightened up this topic. And I think that what I really love the most is the trust factor, because I think in any industry, there are always individuals and organizations and companies that take advantage of people when they're going through tough things. And I think that you're so authentic, and you really, and as Joseph corrected you from anger to passion, I think you have a lot of passion and kind-heartedness in this, and you can't really put a price tag on that. Joseph, you're trying.
I wasn't correcting him. I was giving him an alternative, a more positive alternative.
If I was talking to press, I will use that word.
Yes, exactly.
Some
yes.
friends here, I'll
yeah.
share.
Daniel, much appreciation for today. It was a lot of fun, and look forward.
Yeah. But before we close out the show, Daniel, what's the best way someone can get a hold of you if they want to? We will post everything on the show notes, but we just like to ask that one way that's better.
Yeah, of course. I would love to hear from anybody. I talk to many people constantly. As you can imagine, the moment I tell people what I'm doing, I hear their personal story immediately. Everyone, to your point earlier, it's cathartic to talk. I'm the product of two psychoanalysts, and so I love to talk too. And so if anyone wants to reach out, please email me at daniel@autumn.co. The less expensive version of the .com for now. But reach out anytime. I'm always around.
Thank you so much. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and please give us your feedback, like us, follow us, whatever you want to do. We'd love to hear from you. And we look forward to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you.
Thanks.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.